Преминаваме към морската супа с Ръсел Арнот. Ръсел е океанолог и бивш пънк-рок музикант, както сами вероятно ще забележите. Нека да го посрещнем с аплодисменти. Ръсел.
Hello, hello! I've got to say, this has been the weirdest event ever. It's Saturday and you were like, what should we do on Saturday? Let's hear about wasps and flies. And then it comes to something when you're headlining with plankton, you're like, oh my God, plankton. This is the weird. So hopefully you'll be like, great, let's learn more about plankton. So I'm clicking this button and hopefully this is going to change the slide. It's not changing the slide. I'm just going to sit. Yeah, there we go. It's changed the slide. So this is what we're learning about sea soup. So I'm going to, hopefully, you've walked into this room today, and normally when I talk to people about plankton, I say, what do you know about plankton? And they go, well, it's small, and whales eat it, and there's one in SpongeBob. And that's literally what they know. So at the end of today, you're all going to be so full of plankton facts. You'll be in the bar later and be like, you'll never guess what? I've got this amazing plankton fact, which is, I'm sure, a thing you never thought you would know. Okay, so this is what I look like in 2 dimensions, as well as being, I guess I always feel like an imposter. My background was in ocean physics. So I was interested in the tides, the waves, the currents, the stuff that Hugh showed earlier with, global circulation. And I was like, because I study physics, but I want to learn about all the cool animals that live in the sea, the creatures. So I was like, maybe I can study how physics impacts the biology. So that's hopefully what I'm going to look at a little bit today, in particular, how the physics of the ocean impacts plankton. You're like, oh God, physics and plankton. This is going to get even more boring, right? So when I'm not doing this, I run an ocean education nonprofit. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on. But basically, I've somehow have kind of steered my life into the space where I get paid to dress up as a pirate and have a life-size inflatable orca, which I can take to music festivals. So yeah, I'm like, my dad's like, do you want to be known as the orca guy for the rest of your life? And I'm like, yeah! So there we go. So this is my mission for all of you today. I gave this talk in London, and a week later, this lady emailed me, and she said, oh my God, your talk was so amazing. I wanted to get a plankton tattooed on the back of my head forever. So this is my challenge to all of you. Out of curiosity, does anyone here have a tramp stamp? You know, the tattoo on the lower back? You're about to get a plank stamp. Yeah, right, okay. All the tattoo parlors in Sofia are going to be inundated with plankton tattoos. There we go. So, we're going to start off. And normally when we talk about plankton, everyone's like, plankton, it's just little stuff. They come in 2 different types, broadly speaking. They come in plants and animals. And we're going to start off by looking at the plants. This is my area of specialism. And so these are single-celled plants. Technically, they're not plants because they don't have roots, but they do photosynthesize. And we call this group phytoplankton. Phyto pertaining to plant, and plankton comes from the Greek word planktos, which means to drift or to float. So this word literally means the floating plants, drifting plants. And if we look at, to give you an idea of size, I could say these are 50 microns wide, but you're like, what does that even mean? So if I were to take one of your hairs out, put it under a microscope, this is what it would look like. And your hair does look a bit like a dead snake under a microscope, but this is how big they are. They're roughly the same thickness as a human hair. And so these come in loads and loads of different types. So we're going to start off, and I'm just going to be like, boosh, boosh, boosh. These are the different types of phytoplankton that we get. So the first type, and that type I've just shown you, are called diatoms. So di meaning 2, and it's because they kind of come in 2 halves. They fit together like a Petri dish. And these make these beautiful skeletons from pure silicon. Silicon, the same thing that silicon chips are made from, and sand. And they weave these amazing these tiny microscopic structures. And people have been fascinated by these ever since we discovered microscopes. And there's like thousands of different species of them. And you actually get people that go out and they get their microscopes and they collect these different species. And then there was a group of people in the Victorian era in England. They were called the diatomists. And they would go and they would collect individual cells and they would organize them under a microscope and glue them down, and they would make beautiful portraits. Each one of these tiny shapes is an individual cell that they would have arranged with a tiny pokey needle and glued it down. And this guy here, Klaus Kemp, he's in the corner. Unfortunately, he was the last surviving diatomist and he died last year. But you can still check out his work, and he made beautiful bouquets of flowers and stuff. Now, one of my favorite things about them, and you're like, plankton, yeah, whatever, right? This is an amazing application of this, because they found out by testing those diatom, the shapes they make, the frustules, that they are half the weight of titanium, but twice as strong. So this new research is looking at putting diatoms, dead plankton, into 3D printer ink and printing body armor that would be super lightweight, but twice the strength. So you'd never think that you would have to go into a war zone or bomb disposal wearing plankton and it would save your life. So yeah, amazing applications there. So the next group, and I think these are absolutely awesome, these are called coccolithophores. And the key word there is the coccoliths. And the coccoliths, you can see there that they're covered in shields, right? These are basically like Captain America of the plankton world. And as they're growing, they cover themselves with the shields. Oh, yeah, you can't get me. And then when they die, those coccoliths go out into the water. These coccoliths are made from a substance called calcium carbonate. And that is the same thing that makes chalk. And when these blooms happen, a bloom of coccolithophores, they turn the water this milky color. This is off the coast of where I live in the UK. That's Cornwall in the southwest. And this coccolithophore bloom happened, and it was so big that it was able to be seen from the International Space Station. Now, the cool thing about these coccoliths is gradually they sink down to the bottom of the sea floor, and over millions of years they can build up if the conditions are right, and they end up turning into chalk cliffs. So this is a place where I used to live near Brighton on the south coast of the UK. It's called Seven Sisters, and these are a really, really important cliffs in terms of scientific development and our understanding of the planet. Now, out of curiosity, anyone know who this guy is? Go on. Charles Darwin, yes. I did this at a school once, and someone put their hand up and said, "Is it Sad Santa?" And I was like, "No." And so now I just call him Sad Santa. There we are. So at the time when Charles Darwin was going, writing his on the origin of species, the idea there was that the planet was 6,000 years old, and we got that by going back through biblical texts, and that's what it said. That's what everyone believed. Darwin went to these cliffs and he looked at the chalk dust under a microscope and saw that it was these coccolithophores, related it back to plankton, and he calculated that it would take about 500 years to make 1 centimeter of chalk. He came along with a tape measure, he measured the height of the cliffs, and he came up with the number 368 million years. So this was the first time that anyone had tried to date the Earth longer than 6,000 years. And it was entirely by measuring the rate of sinking of plankton and the height of a cliff. So I was like, my God, that's incredible. There we go. So the next group of plankton, we call these cyanobacteria. Sometimes they're called blue-green algae. Cyan is the color, which is exactly halfway between blue and green. And so these, again, hold an amazing world record. So if you go to this place in Australia called Shark Bay, I don't think it should be called Shark Bay, because these are much more exciting than sharks, honestly. You'll be like, shut up, right? But honestly. So these are like green lumps, and growing on the green lumps is this slimy bacteria. And this slimy bacteria, these cyanobacteria, are one of the oldest life forms on the planet. They originally evolved 3.5 billion years ago. To give you an idea, humans have been on Earth for about 30,000 years. So these have been on Earth for billions of years before there was even any life on land. And so what they do is they build up this slimy ball, then gradually sand goes on top of them, so then they grow on top of the sand. And over millions of years, if I were to come along and take a slice through one of these, I can see these beautiful layers of alternating dead bacteria, which has become mineralized, and the sand. And so these stromatolites build up. So again, plankton, one of the oldest things on the planet. Incredible. And then my favorite guys, and these are so weird. And whenever I show these to people, they're like, huh, what? What is this thing? This is kind of like halfway between a plant and an animal. A planimal? I don't know. But this is called a dinoflagellate. And the key word here is the word flagella. If a cell has a flagella, it helps it swim. The most famous cell of all with a flagella is a sperm cell, a wiggly tail that helps it go where it needs to go. And these are no different. If you think about it, plants, when you grow them, they know which way is up. They grow towards light. These plants, kind of plants, are able to detect where light is, and they can swim up towards it. So that kind of like weird S shape coming out of what looks like its butt crack, that is its tail, one of its flagellas. But it's also got this like ballerina tutu around the top of it, which you can also flap. So this is a type of plankton, kind of a plant that can photosynthesize, that can swim around and position itself vertically in the water. So it can swim up towards the light, it can swim down to get nutrients. An amazing group. And it's this group, about 200 of them, cause this to happen, bioluminescence. And this is just an amazing thing. And scientists still aren't 100% sure why they do this. The rough idea is what they think happens is, let's say a shrimp goes, oh yeah, I'm going to eat that dinoflagellate, swims towards the dinoflagellate. As the shrimp swims towards it, it creates a pressure wave. Then the plankton lights up a bit like a burglar alarm, which then attracts fish to come and eat the shrimp. So it's a bit like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so I've seen this. Unbelievably, we get this in the UK. You definitely get this here in the Black Sea. Go to Varna, go to Burgos, you'll definitely see this. But I've never seen dolphins swimming through it. Oh my God, look at the dolphins. Ah! I had to get the dolphins in. You're like, plankton, I'll show you a glowing dolphin. At least it was worth sticking around to see a glowing dolphin. But now, the weirdest thing that happened during World War II, an American convoy was coming across the Atlantic and it was being trailed by a German U-boat. Accidentally, the German U-boat drove through a patch of glowing plankton, was like, here's the submarine. They could see it and they dropped depth charges on it and sunk it. That report was filed, and then what happened is the Russian Secret Service got hold of that, and about 20 years ago kidnapped a group of Ukrainian marine biologists and forced them to work on plankton detecting submarine stuff. In the end, they were like, please, I don't know how to predict where these things are. Let us go back to our families. So they were like, okay, you can go. So yeah, but you'd never think by studying glowing plankton, it would get you arrested by Russian Secret Service. There we go. So those are all the different plants. You're like, okay, plants, yeah, whatever. What I want to know about are the animals. And like all food chains, right, where the plants have to get eaten by animals. And so the tiny plants get eaten by tiny animals. And so we call this group zooplankton, zoo pertaining to animals. And so we get lots and lots of different types. We get plankton that is just plankton for a small part of its life span. So this would be things like fish eggs or tiny crabs or something like this. But then we also get plankton that is going to be plankton through its entire life. And the main type of plankton, which you can see there, the most famous of all the plankton, is this guy. And he is actually a specific type of plankton. So you can see them on there. We call them copepods. They've got one eye in the middle. They've got these great big long antennae, and they use those to detect chemicals, to detect movement in the water. And the reason why plankton in SpongeBob is this plankton is because Steven Hillenburg from SpongeBob, who invented SpongeBob, he was a marine biologist before he was a cartoonist. So he incorporated this in. Now, this is where I'm going to, I don't often do this, say that Hugh was wrong. He got on stage earlier and was like, krill, krill. Right, I'm sorry, you got this wrong, okay? I checked while you were sitting there, okay? This is how science works, kids, right? So, if he was like, krill, the most abundant thing on the planet, right? If you took all 8 billion humans, put them on a set of scales, and you got all the krill on Earth, put it on the other set of scales, the krill would weigh 100 times more than all the humans, which is insane. Copepods weigh 200 times more. There's twice as many copepods than krill. Yeah! Screw you, Hugh. I don't know. Oh, you were talking about species? Okay, one species of krill. Okay. Copepod's a group. We'll do questions at the end. I'm just slagging Hugh off for the time being. Okay, there we go. Right, so I thought I'd show you one of my favorite. This creature is a plankton for only a small part of its life. And if I zoom into it, I love this guy, and the only way that you can tell it apart from other creatures is it's got these little devil horns. Any idea what this might become? Yeah? What, sorry? That they don't become antennas, but do you know what the animal might turn into? Sea lice, good idea. Not quite. These things, this is them, they're babies, and they swim around, and then when they find somewhere to live, they're like, oh, I want to live here forever. And then they shed their skin, and they absorb carbon, calcium carbonate from the water, and they make this amazing kind of structure, and they stay there forever. These are barnacles, a type of plankton, eventually. Now, the weird thing about them, I mean, I just think barnacles are awesome. Again, you've hung around till the end, so I thought I'd show you this. And Hugh was talking about how important plankton were at pooing. This is now a video of a barnacle larvae doing a poo. Yes! Come on, do it! Yes! Oi! Can we get a round of applause for the plankton pooing? Yeah! There we go. So, brilliant. So, my other favorite barnacle fact. So what happens when they've shed and they make these little houses, they kind of live upside down and they filter feed with their legs. But the problem comes when they need to kind of get it on and make new barnacles. And it's difficult to find someone sexy when you're stuck to a rock your whole life. How are you going to make new barnacle babies? Well, one of their legs has evolved to be a ridiculously long penis. And in fact, if you were to scale, in terms of their body size to penis length, sorry children, they have got the longest penis on Earth. The equivalent is scaling up to humans, my penis would be 30 meters long, right? So I told this to my friend, I said, some barnacle penises can be 2 inches long. And he went, what, 2 inches? That's bigger than some men. Imagine if your wife was cheating on you with a barnacle. There we go. Anyway, enough of penises. So, I thought we'd do a thing. So, what do you reckon this turns into? Shrimp? Kind of close. It's a shrimp. So you see that little spike on the top? I love this. This is to stop them from getting eaten. So they're like, as they're swimming around, they don't want to get eaten, but so they have this big spike on their head. And gradually, as they molt, they kind of get rid of that and they turn into crabs. Oh, it's a baby crab. And then my next favorite one in terms of the plankton is this. It's like a ninja star. What do you reckon this turns into? Sea urchin? Go on, what do you reckon? Pufferfish. That's pretty close. I'll give you a high five for that. Yeah. Okay, it is a relative of a pufferfish, a cousin. This tiny thing, which you can see is about 3 millimeters wide, eventually turns into the largest bony fish in our oceans, the oceanic sunfish. And so these things are so stupid and dopey. How they've survived is they have like 30 million babies, and they're just like, good luck, everyone. And then they just swim off and hope that at least 1 or 2 survive. So yes, I just think, yeah, oceanic sunfish, amazing creatures. So, I've told you, I've given you some pretty good plankton facts. Now I like to think if you're on a Tinder date, it's not going that well, at least you've got one cool plankton fact that you can bash out and be like, you might get a second date. I think that might. Is anyone here on a Tinder date? Just out of curiosity. You're like, yeah, don't take a first date to see plankton talks. Yeah, there we go. Right, so now you're all like, this is great, Russell. You've shown me all the cool plankton. Why should I care? It's my Saturday afternoon. Right, first of all, what I'd like everyone to do is to take a great big breath in. No one did that. Breathe in. And now breathe out. And what we're taught at school is all the trees and the grass and the plants make the oxygen that keeps us alive. But can you take a second breath? Breathe that out. And that breath did not come from the trees, it came from the seas. Because, unbelievably, if we look at a graph of the gases in our air, that red bit is the bit that we like. That is the oxygen that keeps us alive. And if I divide it up, that top bit is made by plants, and that second bit is made by plankton photosynthesizing in the ocean. Because the oceans cover about 70% of our planet, and they are constantly kind of farting out oxygen, it doesn't matter where we are on the planet. We could be in the heart of Africa. We could be in Sofia, hundreds of kilometers from the ocean, but every other breath that we take has been made by the ocean. So we have this permanent link to the ocean, no matter where we are on the planet, which I really love. It's just, if you're having a bad day, just be like, oh, thanks, plankton. There we go. So what I think, for keeping us alive, I think I'd like you all to please shout as loud as you can. Thankton! Thankton! Right. But why else should I care about plankton, Russell, I hear you ask? Well, we'll do a food chain. Now, when I was at school, the teachers always made us do food chains, and it was like, energy from the sun goes into grass, which goes into a rabbit, which goes into a wolf. Who did that one at school? Yeah, some people did. Okay, some teachers were like ahead of the curve, and they were like, energy from the sun goes into grass, which goes into a gazelle, which goes into a lion. And I remember doing these ones, but we're going to do an ocean food chain now. Energy from the sun goes into phytoplankton, which go into zooplankton, which go into fish, which go into humans. There we go. That lady is there because I typed in human in Google image search, and that's what came up. So I was like, so she's like what Google thinks is the archetype human. There we go. So if you like eating seafood or anything from the sea, can we join together with me and say, Thankton? Right, why else should we care about plankton, Russ? Thanks for asking, everyone. Keep asking that question. Well, I've got to say, this is a slightly worrying thing. And I just thought I'd put this in here. Right now, all of us are doing something naughty that we don't really realize. What we're told a lot of the time by companies, you've got to recycle your plastic. You must recycle plastic. And what most of that plastic gets turned into is carpet and polystyrene clothing. We then wash that clothing, and as our washing machines put all the water out, these tiny little microfibers of plastic get washed into waterways. This is a video of all of these tiny microfibers from a washing machine being absorbed by the food chain, working its way up into the food that we eat in the ocean. So yes, slightly worrying. And a city the size of Sofia, just by washing its clothes, will be putting the plastic equivalent of about 5,000 plastic bags every day into the ocean. And so this is one of the things, what's great, the EU is put a thing in place that says what we need is filters on washing machines so we can catch that, take the stuff out, put it in the bin where it can be incinerated. But it's also possible to create clothing that doesn't shed microplastics. And this is why it's important to not buy cheap tat from China, but good stuff that's made properly, so then it doesn't shed these microfibers. There we go. Yeah. Thank you. So, why else should we care about plankton? Well, today you're probably mostly in here because it's raining outside. Well, you know what? You know the smell of the sea when you go to the sea and that sea air? Well, plankton is giving off a chemical. We call this dimethyl sulfide, or DMS. It goes up into the atmosphere, and when it's in the atmosphere, it acts as something that, as we call, a cloud condensation nuclei. It attracts water molecules that are in the atmosphere that go towards it, that then form water droplets that turn into clouds. So plankton make it rain. Oh my God, that's amazing. Can we get thankton? Yay! But, okay, so what else? Well, right now we're all here because of something incredible. Millions of years ago, at the time of the dinosaurs, mainly those copepods and things like diatoms that got a really high oil content, they sank to the bottom of the ocean, and over millions of years, pressure and heat caused those oils, those lipids, to change and to coagulate, and that is what formed oil. And now we go out in an oil rig, we can dig that oil up, and it means that we are basically using borrowed sunshine. Sunlight that was trapped, that energy trapped millions of years ago underground. We can come along, we can dig it up, and we can have this every aspect of our wonderful modern lives, where we can go around, we can drive, we can do all this cool stuff. We can have all of this cool stuff on the slide. Look, our modern lifestyle is because of oil. So I think we need to say, again, thankton. But some people are like, no, I know oil is bad. I'm not saying thankton to that douchebag guy. Right, so we're going to say this bad thing is happening. So I thought this is a great website. You can get it from every city on earth. This is for Sophia. And you can see that unequivocally, our planet is definitely heating up because we are burning that plankton that from millions of years ago and releasing that carbon dioxide back up into the atmosphere. So, but fortunately, we have something that's helping us out. And right now on our planet, all of the world's oceans are full of different species, different groups of phytoplankton that are growing. And because they're photosynthesizing, they are absorbing carbon dioxide, turning it into sugars, respiring. They're keeping it, building it into their structures. And then as they sink, they send it into the deep ocean where it eventually gets locked up in sediments again. So right now, the oceans have absorbed about a quarter of the excess carbon dioxide that we have released into the atmosphere. So if it wasn't for plankton in the oceans absorbing all of this excess carbon dioxide, we would be feeling the effects of climate change much, much worse than we currently are. So I think this is the time we really need to say, thankton! You're doing it really well. Can everyone please do it? Thankton! That's much better. Thank you. So this is my research. This is where I get into it. So we've all gone on holiday or we've gone swimming in the water where it's on a nice hot day. And you can swim in that nice warm bit in a lake or in the sea. But if you put your hand a little bit further down, it's really, really cold. Who's experienced that before? Yeah? Okay. Here's a posh science word for you all. That line where it goes from hot to cold really quickly, we call a thermocline. Thermo because it comes from heat. Now the idea, if you are a tiny plankton, water to you is as thick as syrup or molasses or honey. It's really difficult for you to work through that. And that barrier, that thermocline, acts as an actual wall. You're unable to get across that. So if you're a type of plankton that gets stuck at the bottom, you're like, it's cold, I don't have as much light, you can't grow as well. But if you have some kind of advantage that helps you get in the top layer, you're like, yes, I'm in the warm, I can get the light, and then you can bloom really, really quickly. And so we naturally have something called the spring bloom. And after winter, where it's been really stormy, nutrients have been able to build up. And then all of a sudden, it gets really calm. The sun comes out, gets stronger, we get that thermocline, and then we get a natural spring bloom that happens. But the problem is, things like climate change and another process, which I'll tell you about, is making these plankton blooms happen in an unnatural way, in a bad way, no plankton, okay? So this is a weird map, and this is how climate change has strengthened that layer, that thermocline around the world. And we can see everywhere what's happening is that thermocline has got much, much stronger. So it's harder and harder for plankton to work their way up into that top layer unless they have a special advantage. And the ones that can get up there end up doing really, really well. So what part of this is we have this process called eutrophication, and it means too many nutrients. And this is caused by agricultural practices. Farmers, bless them, are trying to get as many crops as possible to feed us, to feed a world population. They're under increasing pressure, so they spray more and more and more fertilizer on their land. And they spray too much on, then it rains, and it washes into rivers, which goes into the sea. And these excess nutrients cause these rivers and oceans to be clogged up with these giant plankton blooms. If I were to go swimming in this and open my eyes underwater, I wouldn't be able to see. It clogs fish's gills and things like that. And these things happen. When they happen, they're so big, again, that they can be seen from space. Quite often people mistake these for auroras. These are a bit like the auroras of the sea. And we can see them happening all over the world, these giant plankton blooms that are happening because of farming practices combined with climate change. And there's one for the Black Sea. And like I said, these do happen naturally, but these are happening much, much worse, and they're happening with a higher frequency. Now, the big problem with these comes after the plankton has grown, it then sinks and it rots. And as it rots, the bacteria that are rotting them use up the oxygen in the water column, and we end up with something called an oxygen dead zone. Now, collectively, these things cost the whole EU, these things from fishing, loss of earnings from tourism, problems with drinking water, all of this stuff costs the EU 3.8 billion euros every year, which is an insane amount of money. I'll tell you how bad it is. Even Donald Trump has put extra money into researching this to stop it in the States, okay? You know an environmental problem is bad when Donald Trump does something like that, okay? So they are particularly, they're very, very costly. And so here's a map. You can see some of the hypoxic regions, low oxygen, and you can see those oxygen dead zones. So those zones would be the equivalent of us walking into a room with no oxygen. If we stayed in there, we'd die. If a fish swims into that area, they have to turn around and swim out again. And you can see here the Black Sea has got quite an interesting scenario where it naturally has quite low oxygen levels, especially deep. But the Black Sea, again, climate change and farming practices are changing things and making this situation worse. Now, the bad news is there are nasty plankton out there, nasty. About 200 species cause something called a red tide. It's a good band name, red tide. Sometimes we call these harmful algal blooms. And this type of plankton, if I were to go swimming in it, it would irritate my skin, it would be really itchy. If I swallowed some, I'd have diarrhea and vomiting. If wind blew it up into the air and I inhaled it, then it would irritate my lungs and my throat. Well, the real danger comes if this type of plankton bloom happens and it washes into an area with a fish farm or shellfish. And what happens, this toxin then works its way up to the next trophic level, up through the food chain, and it concentrates. It does something called bioaccumulate, which builds up inside life. And there was a case where this happened, where plankton bloom was eaten by the mussels. This was off the coast of Alaska. All the mussels died, and so then in came the lobsters, ate the mussels, and then the lobsters all died, and then in came the sea otters to eat the dead lobsters. All the sea otters died, and then in came the orcas, the killer whales, to eat the dead sea otters. And at that point, the toxin was so strong, it was strong enough to kill an adult killer whale. And so this is a big problem. And again, because of climate change, this is happening much more frequently. Now, I thought I'd share with you another type of bloom, which is particular to Bulgaria. And this is a bloom called a jellyfish bloom. And you're like, I thought you were talking about plankton. Jellyfish are the largest plankton because they have to go where they're told. So I'm still talking about plankton. Yes. And in fact, something quite bad happened because of plankton to the Black Sea. In the 1980s, what happened is there was this nasty little bastard, right? This guy should live off the east coast of the US. And what its common name is the warty comb jelly. Sexy, right? And so what happens is ships, when they leave port, so a ship left port in America, and it took on ballast water, and that ballast water gives the ship stability. It just sucks water in from offshore, and then it sails across the Atlantic, and then as it got to the Black Sea, it's coming into port, it gets rid of all of that ballast water. And anything that is inside the ship that has caught a ride with it, this thing caught a ride across the ocean. And it popped out in the Black Sea and was like, oh my God, this place is amazing, right? Oh my God, there's nothing here. There's loads of food and there's nothing to eat me. And this thing, I mean, this is incredible. And scientists are still trying to figure out the key to its success. I told you I was a physics nerd. One of the keys to its success is you can see it's got these little legs along the side. We call them cilia. And they're the same wavelength, same length as the wavelength of visible light. So as they swim, they look like a rainbow disco. Like, yeah, here I come. But they are like silent hunters. And what scientists actually did, this great paper, where they put particles in the water that could reflect, and then they put laser sheets through. And they found that the reason that they are so amazing at hunting is they basically just open their mouth and they silently just all the food, all the plankton, all the fish eggs just goes into their mouth and they eat it up silently. They do something called laminar flow. Because it's not turbulent, other animals can't detect that they're coming. So these things just came in and they ate everything in the Black Sea. They ate all the zooplankton, they ate all the fish eggs. And then they are so hardcore, right? Those little red arrows, when they run out of food, they start eating their babies. They're just like, this is the thing, they're like, I don't care, get in my mouth, kids, right? So this got so bad that in the early 90s, right, it made up 90% of all of the biomass in the Black Sea. If I were to take everything that was alive in the Black Sea and weigh it, 90% would be one jellyfish. Absolutely insane. This is as much as how many fish we catch in every year. It's absolutely insane. So yes, they made up so much of it. And what ended up happening, the whole fishing of the Black Sea just collapsed. There was hardly any fish because there was no fish eggs and there was no copepods for the fish to survive. So the whole thing crashed. So what scientists did, they were like, look, it just can't get any worse. Like, let's just do an experiment and just let's see what happens. So in the they looked over at what was happening on the east coast of America, and they were like, well, what eats this jellyfish over there? And they found it was this thing, the pink comb jelly. That sounds much nicer than the warty comb jelly. And so this thing, again, is another jellyfish that does eat those other things, but the main predator is, yes, it came in and it ate all of the nasty jellyfish, the warty comb jellies, the Nemiopsis. And so what's ended up happening is now they're both jellyfish are still present. They're still in the Black Sea in high numbers. We still get jellyfish blooms, but it's allowed the fishing to kind of go back to about 50% of what it was in the 80s before the jellyfish was introduced. So they've done some economic estimates on the cost of this one jellyfish accidentally being introduced, and its cost in total something like 430 million euros, which you would never think would ever happen by introducing a jellyfish. Like, you'd just be like, jellyfish, who cares? Can't it swim everywhere? So yeah, so this is a really kind of worrying thing about this. And the bad news is that eutrophication and climate change are making this much, much worse. So when we get those low oxygen events that come in, jellyfish, particularly these species, they don't care. They can survive in very low oxygen conditions. They also really like nice, calm, stable conditions where they can get trapped in that top layer. So essentially, climate change and bad farming practices is causing more of these both species of jellyfish to increase again in the Black Sea. And as those jellyfish increase, it has a bad effect, a detrimental effect on the amount of fish. So climate change and bad farming practices is harming the amount of fish that we're able to catch in the Black Sea. It's an amazing case study. And so now, hopefully, when you go on holiday to Varna, you'll be like, look at the comb jelly. Oh, you'll be well excited. Again, if you're on a date, you'll definitely get a second date if you tell the comb jelly story. There we go. So this is what I was like, this is my research. And I was really interested in our drinking water. And I do a lot of work around water quality. And I was firstly confronted with this lake. And in this lake, we had these two species. So these species are toxic, those nasty red tide species that I was talking about. Now, the one on the left has got a little gas bubble inside it. So what it means, when it's nice and hot, and it has that strong layer, that strong thermocline, that one can just go, and float up through it, and it can get into that top layer, and it can bloom. The other one, Dinophysis, has got this little thing at the back. It's a dinoflagellate. It can go, and it can swim up through. It doesn't make that noise. There we go. But anyway, it goes up, can swim through the thermocline, and it can get stuck in that top layer again, and it can bloom. So we did this experiment where we got pipes, and we laid the pipes along the lake floor, and the pipes had holes in them, and we blew bubbles up through them. And what happened, those bubbles broke the thermocline. They ended up mixing all of the plankton throughout the whole depth. And what we saw is now these things lost their competitive edge. And plankton, such as the heavy diatoms, so that big silicon structure I was telling you about makes them heavy. So when it's calm, they sink out and go down into the bottom area where there's no light. But now we're mixing the water, they get mixed back up into the light, and they don't need as much light to do well. So just by mixing the water, we were able to change what species of phytoplankton was dominant in this environment with knock-on effects for the rest of the ecosystem. And so what I've been doing is going up to this amazing laboratory, which is up in the Arctic Circle in Umeå Marine Science Center. And I've been looking at all the different types of plankton species and things that cause plankton blooms in the Baltic Sea. So the Baltic Sea has a lot of problems, much the same way as the Black Sea. The Black Sea, a lot of the problems arise because you've got rivers feeding into it, but the only way that water can leave is through the Straits of Bosporus, where Turkey is. And it's the same in the Baltic. The only place that water can leave is through the Denmark Straits. So the water is very old. It takes a long time to be circulated or to be replaced. And so it's very easy to get polluted. So I had these really cool tanks. And you know how scientists, the most annoying thing I hate about scientists, is they give something really basic a complicated name to make them sound cleverer. So these are just like giant water tanks. They probably go to the ceiling. Each one holds 2 tons of water. There's the bottom level and the top level. The posh name for them is a mesocosm. Mate, they're just tanks, okay? But what I could do is I could set up different climate change scenarios in each of these tanks. So I could set one up that had a really strong thermocline. I could make another one really well mixed, and I could fill them up full of a plankton population. And I could see which scenarios favored which species of plankton. And then you can predict how climate change is going to impact the plankton and then how that is going to work its way along and impact the rest of the food web. So the bad thing that happened, and this is where the problems arise when you're a physicist trying to do biology, right? I didn't have a bloody clue what I was looking at, okay? And so I had this book, this is my trusty Bible, Coastal Phytoplankton of Northern European Seas, and I was going through it, and I was like, I had my microscope, and I was just looking at things, and I was like, I don't know what these are. And it took me I had this thing, and I was scanning across, and I had like a tally sheet, and it was taking me an hour and a half to count maybe 100 cells. And I didn't know what they were. I was like, it's a ball, it's a sticky thing. So luckily, I saw on X, I saw this amazing piece of equipment called a flow cam. And whereas I was doing this plankton identification really badly, all I had to do with this was pour my plankton in the top. And every time a cell cuts a laser, it takes a photograph. And this is it live. This is live plankton photographing, yes, right? And so what happened, I could then build up a digital repository, a digital library of all of my different cells. I could sort them all out. We can now use AI to kind of speed this process up even quicker. But what I could do is I could send my images over to actual plankton taxonomists who knew what the different species were called, and they could be like, that's that, that's that. So unbelievably, on my laptop, everyone else has like pictures of their dog or like pictures of their girlfriend or something. I have 462,000 photos of plankton. Fantastic. Yes. Yeah. So I thought I'd show you. So this is one of the things that I would go through. And when I was talking to my other collaborators, until we found out what the actual names of these plankton were, well, we came up with stupid names for them. So I worked with this artist called Scott Masson, and he was really interested in my research. And this is where the name of my talk came from, Sea Soup. As you can see there, you can see the mesocosms, and you can see the different species of plankton and stuff. So I thought this was a really cool piece of art. So these are some of my images. And I'll be honest, so these are the names that I gave some of them. And so this first one, now I know it's called Peridiniella. But at the time, I was like, I'll call a centipede. And so I would be like, and then this next one, I was like, microchip. So you'd have conversations like over Zoom and stuff, be like, well, it looks like the centipedes are doing really well in this scenario, but the microchips are going down. This one I called DNA. This one had another name, which I won't, so we'll call this one a canoe for the time being, okay? There we go. There you go. That's a really rude looking plankton, isn't it? Everyone's like, whoa, plankton. There we go. Right, so I thought I'd finish off. This is a question that I always get asked. Well, if you love plankton so much, do you have a favorite plankton? I do, and it's one of the ones that I was studying. Now, this is what it looks like from the top. It's what we call a motile mixotrophic ciliate. So motile means it can swim. Mixotrophic means it can eat stuff and use sunlight. And ciliate basically means it's a distant relative of a jellyfish. Now, this thing from the top looks like a sunflower, but from the side, right, what it's got, it has these 6 tentacles which it pokes out like that. And it does that so when it's nice and calm in the water, it doesn't sink. So it kind of creates its own parachute. And this is the cool thing. When something swims towards it to try and eat it, it can detect the pressure wave from its tutu. And it's like, oh my God, something's swimming towards me. And then it wraps the tutu around the top of the ball. And then it just flaps its wings or its tentacles and it jumps, right? And you're like, why should I care about a plankton jumping, okay? So this thing jumps 1.2 centimeters. And when you're half the thickness of a human hair, right, and you're jumping through a medium which is as thick as treacle, this actually holds the world record for the fastest animal, right? Everyone's like, cheetah, eagles. I'm like, fuck off, right? It's actually plankton, yeah, is the world's fastest thing. This is the equivalent of us being able to just like jump up in the air and like high five airplanes that are zooming over the head. So these are incredible, but I also hate them, okay? So on my experiment, I did this thing. When you're trying to look at how phytoplankton grow, you don't want things in there that are eating the phytoplankton. So I put a filter on to get rid of all the zooplankton, right? It's the equivalent of like trying to study how plants grow, but you put loads of cows in the field. They're going to eat all the grass, and so you get stupid results. This thing where the red arrow is, I did not know this, stupid physics guy, this is a mouth. This is a plant that eats other plants. I was like, you're not supposed to do that, you stupid things. So when this cell is created, it can't photosynthesize. It doesn't have the chloroplasts inside it to be able to take the sun's energy and convert it into sugars. So what it does is it eats another phytoplankton cell, dissolves it, and steals the chloroplasts inside it. We call it kleptoplastidity. It's the equivalent of us just being able to eat a lettuce, then we'd go a bit greener and we could stand in the sun and go and make sugar, right? So I thought I'd show you how awesome this thing is at eating other plants, okay? So this is it. And again, this thing can't see, but as soon as this creature touches its tutu, it's like, I'm having you, mate. And then watch, here we go. Hum. Yeah. And then here's another one. This one thinks it's got away with it, right? But then as soon as it touches that tutu, it can detect it. So it's like sneaking around its butt. It's like, yeah, I'm safe. And it's like, you touch my tutu, hum. There we go. So obviously now I know these things, which are called mesodynium. These are my favorite kind of plankton. At the time, I didn't know what these were, but I knew they were eating everything, and I knew that they looked cool from above. So we just called these for years chompy suns. There we go. So these are my favorite plankton, and this is the plankton that I am going to get tattooed on me eventually. I haven't found a tattoo artist yet. It's weird going in, can you tattoo Mesodynium rubrum on me? Have you got any flash art for that? So I thought I'd finish up. I talked a little bit about climate change. I talked a little bit about eutrophication. And normally when people talk about the ocean and what they can do for it, it's always something like, stop using plastic straws. And you're like, this is such a waste of time, okay? The big hitters, if all of you want to do something really, really, really easy to stop damaging the Black Sea, our ocean, I'm going to show you this graph. Ooh, that's really interesting. So this is how bad foods are at producing excess nutrients that damage our ocean and cause harmful algal blooms. Look what's on there, right at the top, cows. So let's look at another graph, which is a graph of how much carbon dioxide is released from every stage of a food in production. There's clearly something that is standing out above everything else. So that is also cows. I mean, it comes back to it, things like deforestation, eutrophication, climate change, all of these things come back to cows. I'm not telling everyone in here that you need to go vegan. I'm not even saying that you need to stop eating cow. You know, it does taste nice. But what I would like is next time you're at the restaurant and you think, yeah, I'm going to have the beef. Just think like, maybe I'm going to do something for the ocean and I'm maybe going to go for the chicken option or the lamb. So if we can all have slightly less cow in our lives, the ocean will be able to sort itself out. So I'm going to finish up here. So this is my non-profit that I run. This is Incredible Oceans. And the reason I set this up is because we've done a survey in the UK and 1 in 5 under 18-year-olds have never seen the sea. You're like, what the hell? You live on an island, right? And that you can never be more than an hour's drive. And look, this is the furthest point. I can't remember, is it Yasen? Yeah, Yasen on there. So that is the point in Bulgaria, which is furthest from the sea. And that's 3 times further away. So I dare say that this issue about people having never seen the ocean might be more of an issue in Bulgaria. So this is why I set up what I do, because I think the ocean is incredibly important and I want more and more people to know about it. I'm going to finish up here. I wasn't able to bring these. I do have a book. It's called Ocean Endangered. It sounds really depressing, but this is how each chapter is a different ocean zone, and it goes, look at all the cool stuff that lives there, but this bad thing is happening. But this is what you can do about it. So at the end, everyone here will know everything that they can do to save the ocean. Fantastic. There's a picture of me. You can follow me on social media. I'm not particularly good at it, but if you want to, you can see my face on your phone after this, and I'm going to finish up. Thank you very much.
Listen to me. The human world, it's a mess. Life
You got the jazz. Dream about going up there. That is a big mistake.
You know this song.
It's my karaoke song.
You should have heard him yesterday when he was singing the Spice Girls, was it?
It's our national
I tell you what I want, but I really want.
Yeah, tell me what you want. What do you really, really want? I want everyone to have slightly less beef in their diet. You know.
I gotta say, Russell, thank you. That was a fascinating talk, and you can tell, the punk rock musician is really showing up, in your communication style.
Okay.
Yeah, it was great to watch and observe. Now, we learned a lot about plankton, but I actually want to pick your brain as a physicist.
Okay.
As a person who studies like the physics of the sea, and is that right? Or did you specialize in that? Or
Yeah, so
that was news for me.
So basically what happened is I started my career doing fine art painting, and I wasn't very good at it. But luckily, I hadn't studied sciences, but I had studied maths.
Right.
So then when I sidestepped into ocean science, I had to specialize in physics because I had maths. I had no other option. And so so as a nerdy physicist, I'm like, yeah. And so that's why I quite enjoy also bringing the biology into the nerdy physics world. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just wondering, what is a physical process that is going on in the oceans that is most underappreciated or most misunderstood when it comes to like forming the life that we observe?
Well, one of the ones is the thing I've just been discussing. So it's what we call turbulent mixing. And so turbulence is really chaotic. It's really mathematically dense. You need very, very specific, kind of slightly experimental equipment to measure it. And there's only like a small group of physicists in the world that properly do it. Maybe globally, there's about 50 people that can properly study the turbulence in the ocean. Because it's so mathematically dense, it's also ridiculously, it's difficult for biologists to look up a turbulence paper. I barely understand them. And it's just like maths. And you're like, oh my God, this is really hard work. And physicists can be quite gatekeepy. They'll be like, yes, yeah. My problem is, as someone who works in two fields, if I go to the biology conference, people are like, yeah, you don't really know what you're talking about. Like, as you saw, I talk about chompy suns and things like that. But then if I go to physics conferences, people are like, yeah, biology boy, you don't really know what you're talking about. So part of what I'm trying to do is act as a bit of a conduit and show people why turbulence is really important. In the 1950s, there was an ecological principle called the paradox of the plankton. And it seems so, in terms of the theory of evolution, every different species has evolved because there's a particular ecological niche that it can inhabit. But plankton appeared, we've got thousands of species, hundreds of thousands of species that all apparently occupy the same ecological niche. And so this took ecologists ages to figure out, why have we got such a diversity of plankton when to us we've just got one habitat. And so now we've seen that slight changes in salinity, in temperature, in nutrients, in light, and now the more research is coming out in turbulent mixing. This is a really crucial thing that separates ecological niches out in the whole, what we call the water column. And that is one of the mechanisms that has allowed plankton to have such great diversity.
But we barely understand the processes that are behind it, because you're saying it's a very complicated math. So essentially we're dealing with randomness at this point, is that?
To a degree. So you talk about probability curves, and there's lots of stuff about power density spectrums and things like that. And there's different ways. One of the coolest ways that I've seen turbulence now being measured is a British Antarctic survey, have got this really cool thing called an AUV, an autonomous underwater vehicle. It looks like a big yellow torpedo with wings, and they've got different types. And basically, you can throw this off the side of a boat, and it's got basic AI in it, and it swims around underwater, measures things, then at periods it comes up to the surface, sticks his butt out the water, sends the data to a satellite. Eventually it runs out of batteries, it floats to the surface, and you can organize for a ship to rendezvous with it, pick it up, recharge it, send it out again. And so you've now got them with basically what we call shear probes, but they're like a turbulence sensor on the front of them. So as they're going along, they do this like sawtooth profile. They go up and down. And so they are starting to measure the turbulent mixing that's happening in the deep ocean, closer to the seabed, as well as at the surface caused by waves. So
it's really interesting. Yeah. It's like the way the technology develops, it feels like you will be out of work pretty soon. Probably not.
It's very difficult for us to appreciate this because we're in the middle of it, and there's still this idea that we go out in ships and dangle things over the side of a ship, and we do need that, still need that to a certain degree, but more and more ocean science is being done by robots. The ocean is just full of robots, and we are really living through this golden age of ocean exploration. Like when I first started this like 25 years ago, we'd explored 2% of the ocean. And I think to date, we've now mapped 36% of the ocean floor to high resolution. And, we still have to measure the bit in between. And there's still massive cuts. We've seen this in the US, big funding cuts to, ocean research. The reason that, when I talk to a lot of kids, you're like, what do you want to do when you grow up? They're like, I want to be an astronaut. I'm like, shut up, kid. Because like 600 people have been to space and only 12 people have been to the deepest point on Earth. It's much harder to work underwater. Yeah. And it's like, why are we trying to explore Mars and the moon when we haven't finished exploring our own planet yet? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. It's funny how each one of you is dragging to their own field,
Bloody wasps, flies!
Yeah. And at the end, you do have to work together. It's like inevitable. Now, it's a question that I should have probably asked Erica as well and Syrian, but when it comes to the adaptability of these tiny organisms, now I kept on thinking about like viruses and bacteria, how fast they can adapt to their changing environment. That's what makes them dangerous. Now, considering that we are dealing with like very small creatures with fairly short lifespans, is it actually fairly short? I mean, did you say how long does an plankton live?
So it's interesting to talk about viruses. The ocean is full of viruses
that many more,
attack these cells,
right?
And because they're plant cells, so most of plankton cells end up being destroyed by viriyoplankton, which is kind of cool. Don't worry, we can't catch those, okay? But I guess like different species have different doubling rates or like rates that they kind of split in half, and so this can be in the order of like 1 to 2 days. So
right. So does that mean that they are more capable of fairly quickly adapting to a quickly changing environment?
So there was this amazing paper that was done where they got one species of dinoflagellate and they subjected it to like really intense turbulence. And this dinoflagellate was like a spiky ball, and it had spikes on it to stop it from falling out away from, so it could maintain a position in the top layer. But then what happened, as they subjected this species to intense turbulence, the cell thought that it was like being in a storm at the top. So as the cell split and create a new generation, the spikes got shorter. And the spikes got shorter, and the spikes got shorter. So then each subsequent generation could sink away from the storm at the top. Then when they turned the turbulence off, each subsequent generation grew its spikes back. So then it could maintain its position again. So these things are really adaptable and quite plastic, like we've seen a lot of the time with copepods and things, when it is stormy at the top, that thermocline I was talking about, a lot, we get something which we call a subsurface chlorophyll maximum. Sexy, huh? And so that point is where a lot of plankton accumulate because it's the perfect balance between nutrients coming up from depth and being able to get sunlight. So because you get more plankton concentrating at that depth, you also get the copepods and the zooplankton that feed on them also accumulating at that depth. And at winter time, when it's stormier, that thermocline moves deeper, and in summertime when it's calmer and the weather is hot, it moves up to the surface. So yeah, we've got all these different mechanisms. So this idea that plankton are kind of, their very name, they're drifters, floaters, they've just got to go where they're told. They've actually got lots and lots of different mechanisms to help them position themselves optimally so they can make the most of the situation that they're in, so they can float up or float down. Like one of the reasons, a lot of people eat seafood is to get omega-3 oils. Omega-3 oils originate in phytoplankton, particularly diatoms, and they've got the omega-3 oils in them because the diatoms have that heavy silicon skeleton. It makes them likely to sink out, so they're full of oil to help them float back up or to maintain that neutral buoyancy.
So they will be fine, is what you are saying. I mean, they will adapt. What will happen is probably like going up the chain, adaptability becomes more difficult, like larger lifespans, more complex animals.
Yeah,
this will actually make.
I mean, there's still estimates for like how many species of phytoplankton, how many species of zooplankton there are, and what we're seeing is now this climate change scenario. I showed you that map with the increasing strength of the thermocline.
Right.
So that is now we're seeing that it's favoring those species, the toxic species, the ones that can float up, or the ones
that is the danger then.
So that's the problem. I mean, and also like the problem with plankton biology, like with zooplankton, for example, it's fine if a creature stays plankton for its entire life, but that group called merozooplankton, which are only plankton for as part of its life, that start as plankton then grow into something else. There's lots of animals which we know what the plankton stage is, but we don't know what they turn into. When we keep them in a lab, they die. And similarly, there's certain big animals, we just don't know where they come from. And quite often we'll pair them up and we'll find that the plankton has been given one Latin name by the plankton biologists and the big version has been given a name by someone else. But now genetic studies, eDNA, things like that are helping kind of bridge that gap between the two of them.
A book. There is a question if you have a book available on sale. The question is no.
I don't have a book available here, but if you go to Incredible Oceans, there is this big book and I can post it out to you. And there's because I did 1 year of art college, there's a gap when you order the book where you can say what your favorite sea creature is, and I can draw a really bad picture of it in the book before I send it to you. So yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Russell. We still have like a short session with the other guests where I'm going to ask you a couple of more questions, but thank you very much for a wonderful talk. And
Thanks for having us. Cheers. Thank you. Good. Thank you.